Beyond the dark horizon lies a story that no one else is brave enough to tell the world. We sail into the unknown to bring you the raw, unfiltered truth of the human experience. Subscribe now and follow us to the edge of the world and back again.
The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. I was standing in my kitchen, still in my work clothes, when my phone buzzed with a text from my aunt. 4 words, "Your brother is engaged." I set my phone face down on the counter and stood there for a long moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I hadn't spoken to my father in 11 years, and now, apparently, I was expected to show up and celebrate like none of it had ever happened. Let me back up. I was 22 when my father sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten 1,000 dinners, where my mother had helped me with homework, where my brother and I had argued over the last piece of pie, and told me I had 2 choices: marry the man he'd already chosen, the son of his business partner, or leave his house and never come back. I told him I wasn't going to marry someone I didn't know. He told me to pack a bag. I remember standing on the front porch at 11 o'clock at night with a duffel bag and $63 in my wallet. My mother was standing in the doorway. She didn't say anything. She looked at me the way someone looks at a car accident they can't stop, frozen, helpless, not quite willing to believe it's real. I waited for her to call me back inside. She didn't. My brother, who was 18 at the time, watched from the upstairs window. He also said nothing. I walked 2 miles to the nearest gas station and called my college roommate. She picked me up without asking a single question, just handed me a blanket when I got in the car, and turned the heat on high because it was November, and I was shaking. I don't think she understood how serious it was at first. I don't think I did either. I kept thinking my father would call, that he'd realize he'd gone too far, that my mother would talk sense into him by morning. He never called. For the first 3 months, I couch surfed. My roommate's apartment, then a friend from work, then a sublease on a room in a house with 4 strangers and 1 bathroom. I was working as an administrative assistant at a mid-sized accounting firm, making just enough to get by if I didn't eat out, didn't buy new clothes, didn't get sick. I got sick, anyway. A sinus infection that turned into bronchitis, and spent 2 weeks fighting it with generic cold medicine and saltine crackers, because I couldn't afford a doctor visit. I want you to understand what that winter felt like, because it matters for everything that comes after. It wasn't dramatic. There were no villains twirling mustaches. It was just cold and quiet, and lonely in a way that I didn't have words for yet. I was 22 years old and I had been removed from my own family like a splinter being pulled from a hand. Cleanly. Without ceremony. I cried every night for the first month. Then I got busy. I enrolled in evening classes toward a paralegal certification. I studied on the bus, during lunch breaks, on Sunday mornings with bad coffee and worse lighting. 18 months later, I had the certification and a job offer at a small law firm downtown. The salary was modest, but it was real. Within 4 years, I'd worked my way up to office manager. Within 7, I was leading a team of 12, and making more money than my father had ever made at the height of his business. I am not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you so you understand that when I walked into my brother's engagement party 11 years later, I was not the 22-year-old who had stood shaking on that porch. I had rebuilt myself from the floor up. I had done it alone, and I was proud of that, and I had also quietly, carefully spent those 11 years becoming exactly the kind of person my father would not be able to dismiss. My brother's name is Ryland. We had reconnected 4 years earlier, tentatively, through text messages that took days to arrive, and longer to answer. He was 33 by then, running the family landscaping business with my father, and I think he had finally started to understand some things that had taken him a while to see. He apologized once, in a long text that I read, standing outside a coffee shop in the rain because I couldn't wait until I got inside. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was real and I kept it. When Ryland got engaged to his girlfriend of 2 years, a woman named Suki who I had met exactly once and liked immediately, he called me himself. He said he wanted me there. He said he knew it would be complicated. He said he hoped I would come anyway. I talked to my husband about it for 3 weeks. His name is Warren. He's methodical, steady, the kind of person who reads the whole menu before he orders and never regrets his choice. He also happens to be a federal investigator, which is relevant, but I'll get to that. What mattered then was that he sat across from me every night while I went back and forth, and he never told me what to do. He just kept asking the same question: what do you actually want? What I wanted was to see my brother get engaged. What I feared was my father. Warren said, "Go. I'll be right there." The party was held at a country club about 40 minutes outside the city. The kind of place my father had always aspired to. All gleaming floors and people who looked like they belonged in catalog photos. Ryland had booked a private banquet room. There were maybe 60 guests. I arrived with Warren and we stood in the doorway for a moment, and I felt my stomach tighten the way it hadn't since I was young. Then I saw my brother across the room and he smiled. A real, relieved smile. And I made myself walk in. For the first hour it was fine, better than fine. I talked to Suki's family. I held a glass of sparkling water and laughed at things that were actually funny. Warren stayed close, one hand on the small of my back, saying almost nothing but present in the way that mattered. My father was at the other end of the room. I was aware of him the way you're aware of weather, peripherally, constantly, not looking directly. Then, around the 90-minute mark, my mother found me. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older, which made sense. She was 67 now. She held both my hands and told me I looked beautiful, and her eyes were wet. I felt something complicated move through my chest. I had spent years being angry at her. I had spent other years trying to understand her. I still hadn't entirely sorted out which feeling was winning. He wants to talk to you, she said quietly. I looked at her. I think he's ready, she said. He's changed. I had heard variations of this before. Through Ryland, through the occasional message forwarded through my mother. He's changed. He's sorry. He just has a hard time saying it. For 11 years I had received these dispatches, and filed them under possible but unverified. If he wants to talk to me, I said. He knows where I am. She nodded. She looked relieved, almost like I'd given her the right answer, and she drifted back toward the center of the room. He came to me 20 minutes later. My father is a large man. Not tall, but broad. The kind of physical presence that takes up more space than it technically occupies. He walked toward me and I watched him come, and I kept my face very still and thought about the $63. I thought about the gas station. I thought about the sinus infection I'd sweated through alone in a stranger's spare room. He stopped in front of me. He looked at Warren, then he looked at me. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I came for Ryland, I said. Something moved across his face. Recalibration. He'd wanted a different opening, I could tell. He glanced at Warren again. Who's this? My husband, I said. We've been married for 6 years. My father had not been at my wedding. He had not been informed of my wedding until 3 days after it happened. When I sent him a brief email because I thought he deserved to know and not a single thing more. He looked at Warren now the way certain men look at other men when they're assessing a threat. Measuring, dismissive, already composing a verdict. What do you do? He asked Warren. Federal investigator, Warren said. Pleasantly, completely without effect. Something shifted in my father's expression. Only a flicker, but I knew how to read him. I had been reading him my whole childhood. Well, my father said, turning back to me. You're looking well. I am well, I said. He took a breath. I could see him working up to something, organizing words the way he organized everything. For maximum effect, minimum vulnerability. I've been thinking about reaching out, he said. I want you to know I've thought about things. About what happened. What did happen? I asked. He frowned. You know what happened. I want to hear your version, I said. Since we're talking. He shifted his weight. Around us, the party continued. Suki laughing at something across the room, glasses clinking, the polite blur of other people's conversations. You made a choice, he said finally. I made a choice. That's what happened. I was 22, I said. I made the choice to not marry a stranger. You made the choice to put me on the street at 11 o'clock on a November night. He went very still. I had $63, I said. Did you know that? I had $63 in a duffel bag and I walked 2 miles to a gas station in the dark. I was 22 years old. You were an adult, he said, and his voice had gone hard at the edges the way it used to when he was losing an argument and knew it. I was your child, I said. Those aren't mutually exclusive. He looked at Warren. I could see him recalibrating again, searching for leverage, for the angle that would put him back in control of this conversation. I don't know what she's told you about her family, he said to Warren, but there are 2 sides to every story. I've heard her side, Warren said. It includes invoices for groceries, photos of her sublease from 2013, and the medical bills from the winter she spent uninsured. She documented everything. He smiled. It was a mild, unreadable smile. I'm a federal investigator. We appreciate documentation. My father's jaw tightened. I didn't come here to fight, I said, and I meant it. I came for Ryland. But if you want to talk, then I need you to actually talk. Not about 2 sides. Not about choices. I need to hear you say what you did. For a long moment, my father said nothing. I watched the calculations run across his face. Pride, ego, the deep-seated need to be the one who was right. These were things I had watched my entire childhood and had spent 11 years learning to name correctly. I was trying to protect this family, he said finally. You were trying to control me, I said. They're not the same thing. Around us, the noise of the party had dimmed slightly. I hadn't raised my voice. I want to be clear about that. Neither had he. But something in our posture, some gravitational field of old conflict, had created a small quiet radius around us, and I could feel eyes. And then my father did something I had not anticipated. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Pulled up a photo, turned it toward me. It was a document. I couldn't read it at the distance he was holding it, but I could see the letterhead. A law firm I recognized. The same firm my father had used for his business dealings for 30 years. Your mother's estate, he said, and his voice had taken on a quality I'd heard before. The tone of a man who believes he is holding all the cards. She updated her will 2 years ago. You should be aware of how it's structured. I looked at the phone. I looked at him. Why are you telling me this? I said. Because, he said slowly, I think it would be better for everyone if we resolved certain things quietly, between family. There it was. 11 years, and he was still the same man. He had dressed it up in reconciliation language. I've been thinking. I've changed. I want to talk. But underneath it was the same architecture. The same belief that he could determine the terms of every interaction. That I would be so grateful for the offer of peace. That I would accept whatever conditions he attached to it. I took a slow breath. You drove 45 minutes to my brother's engagement party, I said. To show me a photo of a document on your phone and imply that my inheritance depends on my cooperation. He opened his mouth. While my mother is standing 20 feet away, I said. He closed it. I'm a paralegal, I said. I have been for 11 years. I've worked with estate attorneys. I know what a legal document looks like. And I know what it means when someone shows you a photo of one instead of the actual document. Which means either that document means nothing, or you are attempting to manipulate me with incomplete information at your son's engagement party. I paused. Either way, the color had shifted in my father's face. And in case you're curious about whether I need whatever is or isn't in that will, I said, I made more last year than your landscaping business has grossed in any single year since 2018. I have the numbers if you'd like them. We keep very thorough records. Warren hadn't moved. He was standing just slightly to my left, relaxed, the way he looked when he was paying extremely close attention to something. My father looked at him. You let your wife talk to her father like this? Warren tilted his head. Just slightly. Let? Silence. She's the most capable person I've ever met, Warren said. I try to keep up. My father turned back to me. And for the first time in my memory in all the years I had known this man, through childhood and adolescence and the night on the porch and this moment right here, he looked uncertain. Not sorry. Not yet. But uncertain. Like a man who has walked into a room expecting it to be arranged one way, and found that someone had quietly moved all the furniture. I'm going to go find my brother, I said. I'm going to celebrate his engagement, and then I'm going to go home. I started to step past him. Meredith. My name in his mouth for the first time in 11 years. Lower than I expected. Less certain. I stopped. I did think about calling, he said, for what it's worth. I turned and looked at him. My father. 69 years old in a sport coat at his son's engagement party, smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just larger. Thinking about it isn't the same as doing it, I said. But I'll note the distinction. I walked away. Ryland found me by the windows 20 minutes later. He pressed a glass of champagne into my hand and stood next to me looking out at the manicured lawn below, and we didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there. I saw him talk to you, he said finally. I know. Are you okay? I thought about it. Really thought about it, the way I'd learned to do. Not the reflexive fine that I'd spent years deploying, but the actual honest answer. Yeah, I said. I am. Ryland was quiet for a moment. Then, he told me last month that he regretted it. The night he kicked you out. He actually said regret. He said it like the word was unusual, possibly extinct. I don't know if that helps. It's information, I said. He's not going to say it to you. You know that. I know. That's not okay. No, I agreed, it's not. We clinked glasses. Below us, the lawn was orange and gold in the evening light, and the room behind us was full of noise and warmth, and the ordinary beautiful mess of a family, adding one more person to its edges. She's great, I said. Suki. Ryland smiled, really smiled, the same smile he'd had as a kid, the one that always made him look about 14. She really is. Good, I said. You should have married someone great. You did. I looked across the room at Warren, who was talking to Suki's father, laughing at something, completely at ease. My husband. The man who had driven me to therapy for 8 months without ever asking what was said in the room. The man who had once, early in our relationship, listened to me describe that November night and then simply put his arms around me and held on. Yeah, I said, I really did. My father avoided us for the rest of the party. We left around 9. In the car, Warren drove and I sat in the passenger seat with my heels off and my feet up on the dash the way he pretended to hate. And we didn't talk for the first 10 minutes, just let the city lights slide past the windows. You okay? He said eventually. I told him I knew what a legal document looked like. Warren laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of him. You did, and that I'd made more last year than his business had grossed since 2018. Did he ask for the numbers? I offered. He reached over and took my hand without looking away from the road, held it the way he always does, fingers loose, just present. I had gone into that room prepared for the worst. I'd spent 3 weeks imagining every version of that conversation. My father's contempt, his dismissal, the particular way he had of making you feel like a child who'd said something embarrassing. I'd been ready for all of it. What I hadn't fully prepared for was the uncertainty on his face, in that last moment. The small, retreating look of a man who had expected the furniture to be one way and found it moved. I wasn't going to pretend that was enough. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't resolution. There was no letter, no apology, no cinematic moment where he finally said the things he should have said 11 years ago on a cold November night. Real life doesn't always give you that. I had learned, slowly, the hard way, through a lot of sessions in a therapist's office, and a lot of conversations with Warren, and a lot of very ordinary mornings, where I had to consciously choose not to let old wounds run my day. I had learned that waiting for someone else to repair something they broke might mean waiting forever. What I had instead was this. I had walked into the room. I had said the true things. I had not diminished myself to make him comfortable. And I had not raised my voice. And I had not needed him to say anything in particular in order to leave feeling like myself. That, I had decided somewhere around mile marker 12 on the highway home, was going to have to be enough, for now. It was more than I'd had 11 years ago, shivering on a front porch with $63 and a duffel bag. It was in fact, considerably more.